TAG works on atheists who already believe in universal logic because it builds on their assumption and argues that God is the best explanation for it. Most atheists who engage with TAG assume that logic is universal, absolute, and necessary. TAG capitalizes on this by arguing that universal logic must have a foundation, that materialism cannot account for its existence, and that only God can serve as this necessary foundation. Since the atheist already accepts the universality of logic, TAG only needs to establish that universal logic requires a metaphysical grounding and that God is the best candidate for it. However, TAG does not work on RTAG, which challenges the very assumption that logic must be universal. This challenge arises from the shift in our understanding of the universe, from a geocentric to an acentric model. In a geocentric worldview, where humans were thought to occupy a privileged position in reality, it was reasonable to assume that human reasoning reflected universal truth. However, in an acentric universe where there is no center and no privileged viewpoint, the assumption that human logic applies universally becomes questionable. RTAG argues that logic could be a localized system, similar to Newton's laws of motion, which work in specific contexts but break down under extreme conditions. Since humans are no longer assumed to be central to reality, there is no inherent reason to believe that human logic extends across the entire cosmos. Before TAG can argue that God is the foundation of universal logic, it must first prove that universal logic itself is necessary, something it typically does not do. Ultimately, TAG succeeds when engaging atheists who already accept universal logic because it only needs to establish God as the best explanation. However, it fails against RTAG because RTAG questions the universality of logic itself, a challenge rooted in our modern, acentric understanding of the universe. In short, TAG made sense in a geocentric framework where human reasoning was assumed to be central to reality. But in an acentric universe, the universality of logic must first be justified before TAG's argument can even begin. Remember, as RTAG says, localized logic perfectly designed by God. Follow me for more.